Ilara was born on a night when the sky above her world did not move. The stars froze in place, and the elders took it as a sign. From that moment, her life no longer belonged to her. The elders whispered about fate, about a future that could not be changed. They said the child carried a curse and a crown at the same time. She was named a princess, but she was never allowed to live like one. The palace where Ilara grew up was beautiful and cruel. Its walls were made of living crystal that shifted shape with slow breathing sounds. The floors glowed softly, changing color with her mood, though she did not know how or why. Doors opened only when allowed by unseen systems older than memory. The palace was not built to protect her. It was built to contain her. The elders called it the cradle of destiny. Ilara learned to call it her cage. She was told the same story again and again as she grew. If she ever left the crystal throne chamber, the empire would fall. Millions would die. The stars themselves would burn. Because of this, she was forbidden from stepping beyond the inner halls. Guards watched her day and night, not with loyalty, but fear. Servants spoke softly and avoided her eyes. Even as a child, Ilara understood that she was not loved. She was managed. As years passed, Ilara became quiet and observant. She listened more than she spoke. She learned the patterns of the palace, how the lights dimmed when lies were spoken, how the walls hummed louder when anger filled the room. She spent long hours alone, staring at the vast windows that showed the city far below. Ships moved like silver insects in the sky, free to go wherever they wished. She often wondered what it felt like to choose where to walk. The elders visited only when necessary. Their leader, an old figure named Morak, always spoke of fate as if it were alive. He said it watched Ilara. He said it waited. Every word he spoke added another invisible chain around her heart. Ilara smiled when required and nodded when told, but inside she felt something growing. Not rage, not hatred, but doubt. Far from her world, beyond mapped space, a human ship drifted in silence. The ship was old, patched together from parts that did not match. Its name had been painted over too many times to read. Inside, alarms flashed weakly as systems failed one by one. Luke Carter floated in the cockpit, gripping a cracked control bar, his jaw tight with focus. He had not planned to be here. Luke was not a soldier or a hero. He was an engineer who fixed things others abandoned. When corporations pulled out of dangerous sectors, he moved in. When maps ended, he kept going. He trusted tools, logic, and his own hands more than rules written by people who never left safe worlds. The ship shuddered as it was pulled by a powerful force. Luke cursed under his breath and tried to reroute power, but it was useless. Something massive had locked onto him. Space twisted, light bent, and the stars vanished. When the ship stopped moving, Luke was no longer alone. Alien vessels surrounded him, sleek and silent. Energy fields wrapped around his ship like invisible hands. Luke raised his hand slowly, knowing resistance would only make things worse. Moments later, his ship was cut open, not with violence, but precision. He was taken without a fight. Luke expected pain or fear. Instead, he felt curiosity as he was brought into the alien capital. The city floated in layers, towers rising like frozen waves. Technology blended with art in ways he had never seen. But what caught his attention most was the energy running through everything. It felt controlled, restricted, as if the entire city was holding its breath. He was brought before the council. Tall figures with glowing eyes studied him like a problem to be solved. They spoke of trespass and violation of sacred space. Luke listened, calm and respectful. He explained his ship failure, his lack of hostile intent. The elders debated his fate in a language he barely understood. Then Morak spoke. He said the human was a sign. A sign of what? Luke did not know. But the mood in the chamber shifted. Luke felt it like pressure in the air. Finally, the decision was made. Luke would not be executed or released. He would be sent to the inner palace. No one explained why. The palace sensed him the moment he arrived. Lights changed color. Walls hummed with strange tension. Ilara felt it while sitting alone near the crystal throne. Something new had entered her world. Something unfamiliar and alive in a way the palace never was. She stood slowly, heart beating faster than usual. Guards escorted Luke through halls that adjusted around him. He noticed how doors responded before commands were spoken. He traced energy lines with his eyes, already mapping the system in his mind. This was not magic, he thought. This was technology. Ancient, complex, but built by hands like any other. When he was brought into the throne chamber, he saw Ilara. She stood tall, her presence calm but heavy with sadness. Her eyes met his, not with fear but with surprise. Luke bowed slightly, unsure of protocol, then straightened. For a long moment neither spoke. Ilara had seen many beings in her life, but none looked at her the way this human did. There was no reverence, no fear, only interest, like she was a puzzle he wanted to understand. "You are the human," she finally said. Luke nodded. "I guess I am." The guards shifted, uneasy. No one spoke to the princess so casually. Ilara almost smiled. She asked why he had come. Luke told her the truth. About broken systems, about being pulled here against his will. He did not mention fate or prophecy. He spoke as if events were just events, not commands written by the universe. This confused Ilara more than anything. She asked him what he thought of the palace. Luke looked around, studying the living walls, the glowing floor, the invisible systems reacting to their voices. He said it felt like a machine pretending to be a prison. The words echoed in the chamber. The guards reacted at once, but Ilara raised her hand. Something in her chest tightened. Machine. Prison. No elder had ever spoken so plainly. Luke realized he had crossed a line and apologized, but Ilara asked him to continue. She asked what he meant. Slowly, carefully, Luke explained how systems could be built to respond to behavior, how control could feel like destiny if no one questioned it. Ilara listened, her world shifting. For the first time, someone suggested that fate might be built, not born. When the guards finally took Luke away, Ilara remained standing long after he was gone. The palace hummed around her, sensing imbalance. She placed a hand against the crystal wall and felt its pulse. For years, she had believed her prison was written into the stars. Now a single human had planted a dangerous thought. What if fate was only a cage because no one had ever tried to open it? Far away in a guarded chamber, Luke sat alone, replaying the meeting in his mind. He knew one thing with certainty. That palace was not alive. It was programmed. And if it was programmed, it could be changed. Outside the palace, the stars slowly began to move again. Luke woke to a soft blue light and the quiet hum of energy moving through walls. The room was smooth and round with no sharp edges. There was no bed, only a raised platform that adjusted itself when he sat up. He tested the air, breathing slowly. It was clean and warm, almost too perfect. He was not chained. That surprised him. A doorway opened without sound, and two guards entered. Their faces were calm but distant. They gestured for him to follow. Luke stood and did as told, keeping his hands visible. As they walked, he studied everything. The floor reacted to his steps, adjusting grip. The walls carried faint symbols that shifted when he passed. Nothing here was random. He was being watched, not by eyes but by systems. They brought him deeper into the palace, past areas he had not seen before. This section felt older. The glow was dimmer. The hum was louder, like a tired machine pushing itself too hard. Luke felt a strange pull in his chest, the way he did when he saw a broken engine that no one else noticed. Something here was wrong. They stopped outside a wide chamber. The guard stepped aside. The door opened. Alara was waiting. She stood near a tall crystal window looking out at the city below. When she heard him enter, she turned slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp with questions. She dismissed the guards with a small gesture. They hesitated, then obeyed. The door closed behind them. They were alone. "You came back?" Luke said, unsure why he felt relief. "I wanted to understand you," Alara replied. "You speak as if destiny is a choice." Luke shrugged lightly. "Maybe it is, or maybe people just like the idea that they are not responsible." Alara walked closer. The palace reacted to her movement, lights shifting softly. She watched Luke closely, as if trying to see through him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not with fear, not with worship. She asked him about his world. Luke told her about humans, about crowded cities and quiet farms, about ships built from scrap and hope. He spoke of mistakes, wars, and rebuilding. He did not hide the failures. He said humans survived because they learned, not because they were special. Alara listened in silence. She told him about her life, about being watched since birth, about never choosing her own path, about the prophecy that said her steps would destroy everything she loved. As she spoke, the palace lights dimmed, responding to her rising emotion. Luke noticed. He pointed to the wall. "Do you see that?" he asked. She followed his gaze. The light shifted again. "It reacts to you," Luke said. "Not fate, not prophecy. You." Alara felt her breath catch. She had always believed the palace was alive, that it understood destiny. No one had ever suggested it was reading her, responding to her like a tool. She asked how he could be so sure. Luke explained gently, about feedback loops, about control systems designed to guide behavior. He said whoever built this place was smart, but also afraid of losing power. The thought frightened her. Before she could respond, the elders interrupted. Morak entered with several council members. Their presence made the room feel smaller. Morak's eyes fixed on Luke with cold interest. "The human has said enough," Morak said. "He is here to observe, not to teach." Luke met his gaze calmly. "With respect," he said, "observing without understanding is useless." The room went still. Alara raised her voice, firm but controlled. "He will speak when I allow it." The elders exchanged uneasy looks. The palace hummed louder. Morak warned Alara that the humans' ideas were dangerous. He spoke of chaos, of collapse, of worlds burning. He reminded her of her duty. She listened, but something inside her had shifted. Duty no longer felt holy. It felt heavy. After the elders left, Alara felt exhausted. Luke watched her steady herself against the crystal wall. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I have never challenged them before. First time is always the hardest," Luke said. She almost laughed. Days passed. Luke was allowed to move within certain sections of the palace under watch. Alara arranged for him to assist with minor repairs, claiming his knowledge was useful. The elders agreed reluctantly, believing they could control him. They were wrong. As Luke worked, he learned more. The palace was built around a core system that regulated energy, access, and behavior. It responded to emotional and biological signals. Ilara's presence was the key. Her bloodline carried the access code. The prison was her. Luke realized the prophecy was a safety protocol, a story built to keep her from triggering changes the system could not allow. He shared this slowly with Alara, careful not to overwhelm her. Each truth cracked something inside her, but also made her stronger. She began to test the palace. Small steps at first, lingering near restricted doors, focusing her thoughts, calming her fear. Each time the system hesitated. Lights flickered, barriers softened. It was learning from her, just as she was learning from it. The guards noticed the changes. Whispers spread. The elders grew nervous. One night, Elara stood at the edge of the inner hall, a place she had never crossed. Luke stood beside her, his heart racing. This was farther than she had ever gone. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "No," she said, "but I am tired of being certain about nothing." She stepped forward. The palace trembled, then steadied. Alarms did not sound. The world did not end. Elara laughed softly, a sound new and bright. The elders reacted with fear. Morak ordered Luke confined and Elara restricted. Guards rushed in, pulling Luke away. As he was dragged from the chamber, Luke locked eyes with Elara. "This is just the beginning," he said. She nodded, fear and determination burning together. Alone again, Elara felt the palace press in on her, reacting to her rising anger. But she did not shrink this time. She stood tall, breathing steadily. Somewhere deep in the palace, systems adjusted. And far above, the stars watched as a story older than the Empire began to break. The room where Luke was locked felt colder than the rest of the palace. The light stayed dull and did not react to his movement. That alone told him something important. This place was older, more rigid, less adaptive. Whoever built it did not trust even their own systems here. Luke sat on the floor with his back against the wall, breathing slowly. Fear would not help. Panic never fixed broken machines. He closed his eyes and listened. Beneath the silence, he could hear it, a deep rhythm, like a heartbeat made of energy. The palace core was close. Guards stood outside, silent and unmoving. Elsewhere, Elara faced the elders alone. Morak stood before her, his voice sharp with anger. "You crossed a boundary that was never meant to be touched." Elara kept her voice steady. "The boundary did not stop me." "That is the danger," Morak replied. "Fate allowed you to live only because you obeyed." Elara took a step forward. The lights flickered. Fate did nothing. The system did. The elders stiffened. A few exchanged uneasy glances. "You speak the human's poison," Morak said. "He twists truth into chaos." "Or maybe he sees what you hid," Elara answered. The palace hummed louder, reacting to her rising emotion. Elara felt it clearly now. The palace did not judge her. It responded to her. Fear made it tighten. Calm made it soften. She breathed in slowly. "I want the records," she said. "The true records, not the stories." Morak refused. "Those records are sealed for the good of the Empire." "Then unseal them," Elara said, "or I will." The threat was quiet, but it carried weight. The elders knew she was changing. They could feel the palace shifting under her presence. Morak turned away. The council would consider her demand. Elara knew that meant delay, not agreement. That night, she could not rest. She walked the inner halls, her steps slow and measured. Each time she approached a restricted path, the barriers weakened. The palace was learning her will. Far below, Luke did the same in his own way. He studied the room, every surface, every faint change in light. He tapped the wall lightly, feeling the vibration change with pressure. After hours of careful testing, he found it, a maintenance seam hidden beneath layers of crystal growth. He smiled faintly. Even the most perfect prisons had cracks. Using a small tool he had hidden in his sleeve, Luke began to work. It was slow, careful. The wall resisted at first, then gave slightly. Energy leaked like mist. He did not force it. Forcing systems only caused alarms. Instead, he followed the flow, adjusting it bit by bit. Outside the room, a guard frowned. Inside the palace, Elara stopped walking. She felt it. A change. Small, but real. Luke was touching the system. She closed her eyes and focused, steadying herself. Instead of fear, she sent calm into the palace. Instead of anger, curiosity. The response was immediate. The hum softened. Pathways opened. The guard outside Luke's cell felt dizzy for a moment, then stepped away, confused. The door unlocked itself. Luke froze, then stood slowly. He did not rush. He slipped out into the corridor, staying close to the wall. The palace guided him, lights dimming ahead, brightening behind. It was leading him somewhere. To her. When Alara saw Luke step from the shadows, she felt relief so strong it almost made her weak. But she did not run to him. She stood firm. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "Neither should you be imprisoned," Luke replied. They shared a brief smile. They moved together through hidden paths, guided by the palace itself. Alara realized something important. The system was not just responding, it was choosing. It wanted change. They reached an archive chamber sealed behind layers of crystal locks. Alara placed her hand against the door. It resisted, then yielded. Inside, the air felt old. Records floated in light, data preserved across centuries. Luke accessed them carefully, translating as fast as he could. Alara watched, her heart pounding. What they found shattered everything. The prophecy was not ancient fate. It was a command override. Long ago, Alara's ancestors had the power to reshape the empire. They challenged the council. In response, the palace was built to bind their bloodline. The prophecy was created to ensure obedience through fear. The system was designed to react violently only if she tried to leave without control. The fear of destruction kept her compliant. "They made me afraid so I would never test it," Alara whispered. Luke nodded. "Fear is the cheapest lock." Alarm suddenly flared. "They have found us," Luke said. Guards flooded the corridors. The palace trembled under conflicting commands. Alara felt it struggle, pulled between obedience to old rules and response to her will. She made a choice. Instead of running, she stepped forward. She reached out, not with anger, but with clarity. "I am here," she thought. "I am not your prisoner." The palace responded. Walls shifted, pathways sealed behind the guards, energy fields redirected. Luke stared in awe. "You are not breaking it," he said. "You are rewriting it." Morac's voice echoed through the chamber. "Stop this at once." Alara turned toward the sound. She walked openly into the central hall where the elders waited. "This ends now," she said. Morac shouted warnings of collapse and ruin. But the palace remained steady. The stars outside did not burn. Nothing ended. The lie was exposed. Some elders fell silent. Others dropped to their knees. Fear had ruled them for generations. Luke stood beside Alara, not as a savior, but as a witness. "The system has one more fail-safe," Luke said quietly. "It will try to shut down if it loses control." Alara nodded, then let it change instead of die. She placed both hands on the crystal floor and focused on balance, not dominance. The palace hesitated, then adapted. Deep within its core, ancient rules dissolved. When the hum settled, the palace felt lighter. Alara straightened. The chains she had never seen were gone. Outside, the city lights brightened as systems across the capital adjusted. Citizens looked up in confusion and wonder. Morac stared at Alara, his authority broken. "What are you?" he asked. Alara met his gaze. "Someone who chooses." And far above the world, the stars moved freely, no longer bound to a lie. The palace did not feel the same after the truth was revealed. The hum that once pressed down on every thought now felt softer, like a deep breath, finally released. Corridors opened without resistance, lights no longer dimmed in fear. Alara could feel the change with every step she took. The prison was no longer trying to hold her, but freedom never comes without a cost. Across the capital, alarms began to rise, not the sharp warning tones of invasion, but deep system calls that echoed through the city. The ancient network that bound the empire together had sensed a shift at its core. Control was slipping, and many systems did not know how to exist without it. In the council chamber, the elders argued in chaos. Morac stood apart, his face tight with rage and fear. "The empire is unraveling," he shouted. "The human has poisoned the core. The princess has broken the balance." Ilara stood calmly before them. Nothing is broken, only the lies. Some elders looked away, others stared at her with open terror. They had ruled through fear for so long that truth felt like an enemy. Outside the chamber, soldiers gathered. Loyalists to the old order armed themselves, believing they were defending the empire from collapse. They did not see themselves as villains. They believed they were saving everything. Luke watched the feeds from a control platform, his hands moving fast as he tried to stabilize the network. The palace was changing faster than expected. Subsystems were waking up, asking for instructions that no longer existed. This place was never meant to think for itself, Luke said quietly. Ilara stood beside him. Then teach it to listen instead. He nodded, understanding her meaning. Control had to be replaced with trust. Not all at once, but enough to keep the system alive. They worked together. Luke translated code into patterns Ilara could guide through presence and intent. She learned how her calm stabilized the palace, how fear caused feedback spikes. It was exhausting, but she did not stop. Below them, the first clash began. Soldiers loyal to Morak pushed toward the inner palace. They disabled guards who hesitated. The city filled with confusion as news spread that the prophecy was false. Some citizens celebrated, others panicked. Ilara saw the movement on the screens. They are coming for us. Morak wants control back, Luke said, and he will burn the palace to get it. Ilara closed her eyes for a moment. For the first time, she felt the full weight of leadership. This was no longer just her freedom. It was the future of millions. She opened her eyes. Then we meet him. They descended into the central hall as soldiers breached the outer layers. The palace shifted to protect civilians, redirecting force away from residential zones. Ilara guided it gently, refusing to let fear rule her again. Morak entered the hall surrounded by armed guards. His voice echoed with authority he no longer deserved. "This ends now," he said. "Step away from the core, princess. Accept your fate." Ilara walked forward alone. "My fate was written by cowards," she replied. "I choose my own future." Morak raised his hand. Soldiers aimed their weapons. Luke moved to step forward, but Ilara stopped him with a glance. She reached out to the palace, not to command, but to ask. The crystal floor rose slightly, forming a barrier between soldiers and civilians. Weapons systems hesitated, unsure of targeting parameters. The palace refused to become a weapon. Morak shouted in fury. "You see?" he cried. "The system fails without control." "No," Ilara said. "It refuses to kill for fear." The words struck deeper than any weapon. Some soldiers lowered their arms. Doubt spread faster than orders. Morak activated a final override, a hidden failsafe buried deep in the old code. If he could not rule, nothing would. The palace screamed. Energy surged through the core. Systems destabilized. Luke felt it instantly. "He is forcing a shutdown," Luke said. "If the core collapses, the palace will die. Maybe the city too." Ilara felt the pain ripple through the structure. This time, she did not panic. She moved toward the core chamber, walking through chaos as walls shook and light flared. Luke followed, ignoring the danger. Inside the core, energy spun wildly. Ancient commands fighting new ones. The system was tearing itself apart. Ilara stepped into the center. The guards shouted for her to stop, but she did not listen. She placed her hands on the core and closed her eyes. She did not think of fear. She did not think of destiny. She thought of choice. "I am not your prisoner," she thought, "and you are not my cage." The energy slowed. Luke watched in awe as patterns shifted. Instead of collapsing, the core began to adapt. Old rules dissolved, new pathways formed. Morak screamed in disbelief as control vanished from his grasp. "No," he cried. "You will destroy everything." Ilara opened her eyes. Everything was already destroyed by lies. The core stabilized. Throughout the city, systems recalibrated, power grids balanced, weapons shut down, communication cleared. The empire did not fall. It breathed. Morak collapsed, his authority gone. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Silence spread through the hall. Ilara stepped back, drained but standing. Luke moved to her side. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did it." Above them, the palace shimmered, no longer a prison or a throne, but something new. Outside, citizens gathered in the streets, looking up as the crystal towers shifted into open forms. Doors that had never opened now stood wide. For the first time in generations, the capital was not ruled by fear. Ilara looked at the city and felt something unfamiliar and powerful: hope. And deep within the palace, a new story began to write itself. The city was quiet in a way it had not been for generations. The crystal towers no longer hummed with control and fear. Instead, they pulsed gently, like living witnesses to a new era. Citizens emerged from their homes, blinking at the open gates and the soft glow of energy that now felt safe rather than oppressive. For the first time, they saw their world not as a cage, but as a home. Ilara walked among them, her long cloak brushing the crystal floors. She did not need guards. No one moved against her will anymore. The palace itself had shifted, adapting to her presence and her choice, no longer a prison but a living network that listened and responded without judgment. She had learned to guide it, not dominate it. Luke moved beside her, quiet but alert. He had stayed because she asked, though he knew he could leave at any time. The city was alive with change, and he wanted to see it happen safely. He still did not fully understand the palace's systems, but he could see the logic, the patterns, the responses, and he trusted Ilara to lead. The first council meeting after the collapse of the old order was tense. The elders who remained were pale and quiet, uncertain if they still had a place in a world without fear. Ilara did not speak with anger. She did not punish. She simply said, "We are all responsible for what we choose. Those who choose to harm may leave. Those who choose to learn may stay." Some left immediately, taking ships from the docks, retreating to outer colonies. Others stayed, hesitant but willing to serve a new way of life. Ilara appointed new guides, citizens who had skills and knowledge, not rank or lineage. She allowed humans and aliens to work together. She invited Luke to advise, not as a leader, but as someone who understood freedom and choice. The palace itself seemed to approve. Pathways opened for new access. Lights glimmered with soft warmth, and the energy lines that had once imprisoned her now guided citizens through safe corridors. She touched the walls gently, feeling the pulse of the place. It responded not with fear, but with trust. Luke watched her work. He had seen leaders before, in human cities, in war zones, even in corporate halls. But Ilara was different. She did not demand obedience. She did not rule through fear. She guided with presence and patience. She was not perfect, but she understood what humans often forgot. Freedom was more powerful than control. Word of the truth spread through the empire. The prophecy was false. The palace was no longer a weapon of fear. People were skeptical at first. Some refused to believe that destiny could be rewritten. But as more citizens experienced the open gates, the soft energy, the absence of fear, their doubts faded. They saw choice in action. They saw hope. Morak did not return. He vanished into the outer colonies, muttering about chaos and ruin. The citizens, however, did not fear him. They had witnessed what a single person and a human companion could do when lies were challenged. Ilara's story became a beacon. She did not seek fame. She only sought freedom, and by pursuing it, she inspired others to see beyond their cages. One evening, she walked with Luke to the central courtyard. The sky above was filled with stars, bright and steady, no longer frozen by superstition. She turned to him. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Luke smiled faintly. Because no one should live in a cage they didn't choose. She studied his face. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and yet brave in ways her people could not always understand. She realized that humanity's strength was not in machines or weapons, but in persistence, curiosity, and courage to challenge the rules. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then citizens approached, curious, respectful, but not afraid. Ilara welcomed them, answering questions, offering guidance, and listening to concerns. She realized leadership was not about control. It was about presence, and about listening to the needs of everyone. The palace responded to her efforts. New systems arose, designed not to punish, but to protect. Energy lines formed gentle pathways. Doors that had once been barriers became access points. Citizens could move freely and safely. The empire was no longer bound by fear. It was guided by choice. Luke worked beside Ilara for many weeks, stabilizing the palace systems and teaching citizens to understand and respect them. He did not rule. He advised. His presence reminded everyone that freedom required responsibility. Humans had learned to survive because they adapted. Now the empire would learn to thrive because it could choose. Ilara often visited the throne chamber, no longer a prison, but a place of calm reflection. She remembered the years of isolation, the fear, and the doubt. And yet, she did not regret them. They had taught her patience, observation, and the quiet strength of a determined mind. She had turned the palace into a partner, not a master, and in doing so, had rewritten her destiny. She thought of her people, the citizens who now walked freely, the guards who no longer feared her, the elders who had learned humility. She thought of Luke, the human who had reminded her that chains exist only when they are believed in. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The empire changed slowly, as change always does. New leaders arose from unexpected places, chosen for skill, wisdom, and character. The citizens learned to participate in governance. Disputes were settled with dialogue, not threat. The stars above no longer seemed distant or dangerous. They were a reminder that the universe was vast, full of possibilities, and that fate was not written in stone. One day, Ilara stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Luke joined her, leaning against the railing. The palace stretched behind them, calm and responsive, alive in a new way. Citizens moved through the streets below, laughing, speaking, and walking freely. The city breathed, not as a prison, but as a home. "You've changed everything," Luke said softly. "No," Ilara replied, watching the horizon. "We've changed everything. Together." They stood side by side, human and alien, observing the city they had helped save. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of crystal and energy. The stars shone brighter than ever, reflecting the promise of freedom. For the first time, Ilara felt no chains, no destiny, only the quiet, steady power of choice. And in that moment, she understood the truth she had fought for all her life. The strongest force in the universe is not fate, prophecy, or fear. It is the courage to decide for oneself and the wisdom to respect the choices of others. The empire would remember that. The palace would remember that. And she would carry it forward, not as a princess bound by destiny, but as a leader guided by freedom, with a human friend who had shown her that even the stars could be rewritten. Ilara turned to Luke one last time before leaving the balcony. "The future is ours to choose," she said. Luke nodded, smiling. "And we won't waste it." Together, they walked back into the palace, not as prisoner and visitor, but as partners in a new world. The walls shimmered softly around them, alive with trust and possibility, ready for the stories yet to be written. Outside, the city thrived. The people, once bound by fear, now moved with confidence. The empire breathed, and somewhere far above the stars shone down on a princess and a human who had dared to rewrite fate, and in doing so, had shown that freedom is the greatest power of all.